I feel like Sonic Mania is a fitting choice for a first entry in this journal. And to tell you why, let's take a step into the time machine and travel back to one of my earliest memories. I was sitting on the floor of the living room with my two older siblings. I was probably only 3 years old at the time, so what my siblings were doing was beyond me. But they had this big black box in their hands, and were watching some character move across the TV screen. At some point, I was called over to push a button on the black box, and the craziest thing happened. That red guy on the screen moved. He just jumped. I made him do that. It turns out that my siblings were playing a video game called Sonic and Knuckles for the Sega Genesis. And that big black controller I used was the arcade power stick. It was basically the same as a standard controller, but it had a joystick on it, so kind of a big deal. Anyway, I got to hit the buttons a few more times when the red guy, Knuckles the Echidna, was on the pulley system in Mushroom Hill Zone. I was absolutely mesmerized that I could make him move on the screen and could make the pulley move faster by hitting the buttons faster. He doesn't actually move if you go fast, but I was 3. I was having fun. I say all this because Sonic & Knuckles was the first video game I ever played, and it set me on a path that heavily influenced my gaming interests. And probably my interest in running too, but that's a story for another time. The point is, the Sonic franchise is what got me into video games, and it's a series I have a ton of nostalgia for. So, when Sonic Mania was announced and showed off a beautifully animated trailer claiming to be the true sequel to Sonic & Knuckles, I was understandably hyped. You see, since 2006, most new Sonic games were considered bad by the masses. So anytime a new game was announced, there was reason to be hesitant. But Sonic Mania seemed different. It was being developed in large part by people who created Sonic fan games, such as Christian Whitehead. This is the guy who made the mobile ports for Sonic 1, 2, and CD, which remain the only mobile games I've ever spent money on. And money well spent, I might add, because those ports were incredible. Basically, Sonic Mania was being touted as a game by Sonic fans for Sonic fans. It was going to be a breath of fresh air. Let's fast forward to the day Sonic Mania came out in August 2017. I was starting my junior year of college, and for the first time, I was living with roommates of my own choosing. We ventured out to GameStop to pick up the deluxe version of the game. Shout out to Mom for pre-ordering that for me. What came with the deluxe version, you may ask? A statue of Sonic, of course. It had some custom backgrounds you could use for your PS4 menu screen as well, but come on, the statue was the main draw. I still have it displayed in my kitchen, and the backgrounds are still in use on my PS4 all these years later. So I guess it was worth the cost. Thanks again, Mom. Just to reiterate, I got Sonic Mania the day it came out, so I had seen very little gameplay beforehand. My roommates and I had no clue what to expect. We went back to our beautiful piece of campus housing, booted up the game, and were completely blown away. We flew through the first half of the game in one sitting before finishing it the next day, only pausing because we needed time to take it all in. The game only takes 3 to 4 hours to beat, just FYI. Every single level felt like a masterpiece in color, sound design, and of course gameplay. But the thing that stuck out with us the most were the callbacks to previous games. Now let me pause right here to say that my roommates had also grown up with Sonic and were big fans. We spent the first few days of our new living arrangement by playing Sonic games on the GameCube such as Sonic Mega Collection, which features several of the classic games from the series. One of those games was Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, a color matching game similar to Tetris or Dr. Mario. None of us had actually beaten it as kids, so we decided to tackle it together a few nights before Sonic Mania came out. And can you guess what the boss of Sonic Mania's second zone is? A game of Mean Bean Machine. We were so giddy seeing this relatively obscure game being included in Sonic Mania, and the fact that we had beaten Mean Bean Machine that same week made it all the more memorable. The craziest part of this boss fight is that it was featured in just the second zone of the game. You would think the developers would save such a unique fight until the later stages, but no, they busted it out real early. And they could afford to do so because every, and I mean every, single stage feels fresh and unique. Mechanics from previous games were brought back in creative and unexpected ways, and just filled us with a sense of bewilderment. You could write this off as being nostalgia blind, but the callbacks were done in tasteful ways. Nothing felt shoehorned in or out of place. Now, with that said, 8 of the 12 zones in Sonic Mania are remixes of zones from previous games. I had an absolute blast seeing new ideas injected into these old levels, but I know that those more critical of the game would complain about this aspect. Needless to say, my first playthrough of Sonic Mania was incredible. I had this dumb smile on my face from start to finish as I got to experience something so lovingly crafted by people who shared the same passion as me. It didn't feel like a fan game or just some rehash of the golden days of the franchise. It was an evolution of how a Sonic game should look and feel. But now, almost 7 years later, do I still feel the same way? I mean, the surprises and sense of wonder have worn off because I play this game multiple times a year, but that's to be expected. I definitely played through the game with rose-colored glasses the first time, but the flaws I see now aren't anything too egregious. Maybe a few more new zones would have been nice, and the 10-minute timer per level can be a bit annoying if you want to explore. In all honesty, I think the game has improved since its release in 2017, as the DLC added Mighty and Ray as playable characters, plus the Encore mode remixed all 12 zones even further. Objectively speaking, Sonic Mania is a well-designed 2D platformer with possibly the best sprite animation I've ever seen. The colors, music, and sound design are all top-notch, and the level design gives you reason to go back and play the game multiple times. On a more personal level, Sonic Mania has become one of my comfort games. If I want to play video games, but nothing is speaking to me at the moment, Sonic Mania is what I fall back on. By nature of its design, Sonic Mania isn't going to change anyone on an emotional level with storytelling, or completely rewrite the book on what it means to play video games. But as is the case with any good platformer, the game feels good to play in terms of controls. And for me, it makes me feel good on the inside. It's just an incredible feeling of joy that stems from playing a series since I was a toddler. Sonic Mania is the encapsulation of over 20 years of my gaming experience put into one succinct package. It fills me with a sense of nostalgia for Sonic, of course, but more so, it fills me with nostalgia for gaming itself. And I don't think another game could accomplish the same feat. Well, until they make Sonic Mania 2, of course.